Hi guys, this is a video for chapter 5, lesson 4, and lesson 5. So I'm going to just review a little bit over what we learned in chapter 5, lesson 4, which is solving an inequality. Now, when we see the word inequality, that just means an equation that has the less than, greater than, or equal to, or less than or equal to sign. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over this because you've already learned this in class. But when we are solving an inequality, an equation with an inequality, we basically just treat it as if it's a regular equation and apply the same rules as if this were an equal sign and work it out. So if I want to solve for b, I'm going to subtract 8 on both sides. Negative 12 minus b is negative 20. I'm going to bring my inequality sign down, and that's less than, and then b. So when we read this, if you want to read out loud with me, we have negative 20 is less than b, which means the value for b in this equation can be anything as long as it's greater than negative 20. So if you think of a number that's greater than negative 20, we could maybe replace that for b. So let's say, I don't know, positive 1 is greater than negative 20. So if I replace b with 1 and I plug this in and check my equation, I should have a true sentence. So what I would have here is negative 12 is less than 9. And so negative 12 is in fact less than 9. So let's try another one. Let's take a look at number 3. I want to solve for p. So I'm going to subtract 5 on both sides. P now is less than negative 18. So that means whatever value P is has to be less than negative 18. So if you think maybe negative 20 is less than negative 18, so if I replace P with negative 20, add 5, I should have negative 15. Negative 15 is less than negative 13. So when you look at this on a number line, negative 15 is farther to the left on the number line. Now let's take a look at if we have two signs, okay? If we see this says n minus negative 18. Now, remember we've talked about how we want to condense this to just be one sign, one operation, rather than two signs. So if we apply the two-stroke method like we've learned before, we can add the opposite when we're subtracting a negative. So when we add the opposite, this becomes 21 is less than n plus 18, which is so much easier to work with than when you have two signs. And so now I can subtract 18 on both sides, and that would be 3. So 3 is less than n. And so the value for n that I could put in place my equation to check my work is anything bigger than 3. I could put 4, 5, 6, right? I have so many numbers to choose from. Right here, let's look at number 9. We can condense this to be z minus 4 instead. So z minus 4 is less than negative 2.5. So I'm going to add 4 on both sides, and z is less than negative. Ooh, let's add 4 on this side. That would be 1.5, or positive 1.5 actually. So this is z is less than positive 1.5. So you get the idea. We're not really doing anything different. We're just applying this inequality. So really this lesson, we get to practice solving for our unknown in our equation. And of course they did sneak in a few fractions. So here's a fraction here, here's a fraction. We're going to do the same thing, right? So let's do number 10. We're going to add 1/4 on both sides. And 2 1/4 plus 1/4 is just 2 2/4. But if I simplify that, that's 2 1/2. So I have b is less than 2 1/2. And that's my equation. If you see a fraction where there's not the same denominator, you probably want to transfer that and change that to be a fraction with a common denominator. Now that's the main idea here. You're really not doing anything new. You're just bringing that inequality sign down and writing that instead of an equal sign. And then when you read your number sentence of your answer, what you see is that your value for P, there's actually more than one possible solution. You can have anything in the range as long as it's fitting into your inequality. Whereas when it's an equal sign, you know exactly it's X equals a certain amount, and that has to be your answer. So with an inequality, you just have more than one solution that can be true as long as it fits in that range. Okay, let's take a look at solving inequalities with multiplying and dividing. Now, this is also pretty similar. So when we're solving an inequality, let's say I do number 1 over here. I'm going to do that. 81 is less than 9D. So to solve for D, I can divide by both sides, divide 9, because the opposite operation of 9 times D is division. So when I divide this, I have 9 is less than D. And so if I wanted to plot this on my number line, let's practice plotting it on our number line and graphing it. So 9 is my solution. It doesn't include 9. And D is, see how this side is pointing, the wider side's pointing to D? So maybe I'll draw that. D has to be bigger than 9, which means all my possible answers for D have to be greater than 9, which is all to the right of 9. So I'm going to make a little arrow and a line pointing towards the right. Okay, so that's my solution. I just graphed it on there. Now, let's talk about something real fast. What if my equation was actually 81 is less than negative 9D? Okay, so if I do this, I'm going to apply the same rules, divide by negative 9 on both sides. My answer would be negative 9 is less than D. Now, let's do something here, okay? If I were to check my answer and plug it back into this equation, let's say we've got 9 has to be greater than negative, or D has to be greater than negative 9. So a number that's greater would be like, let's say 10, for example. 10 is greater than negative 9, right? So if I plug it back into this original equation, what's going to happen? I'm going to have 81 is less than negative 9 times 10. Now, if I do this, 81 is less than, negative 9 times 10 is negative 90. Is this number sentence true? Is 81 less than negative 90? No, it's not. It's not true. So what's happened is I actually have an inequality that's not true. It's not giving me a true statement. So this doesn't make sense here. And so because we run into this situation almost every time we multiply or divide by a negative on both sides, so if we check and do a few more of these, we'll realize anytime you're multiplying or dividing by a negative on both sides of your inequality sign, your number sentence will not come out to be correct when you check it. So for us to avoid this situation, we have to flip the sign so that we can have when we check our answer, we have a solution that actually works. So what I mean by flipping the sign is when we're dividing or multiplying by a negative on both sides, instead of writing our sign or inequality the way it is in our equation, we're going to flip it. So now it becomes greater than. Now we have 81 is greater than, sorry, let me work that out. So this 81 divided by negative 9 would be negative 9. Negative 9 is greater than D. So this is my answer. So the difference between what I just did is that I flipped from going lesser than to become greater than. Now when I check my answer, D has to be anything smaller than negative 9. And if I plug in a solution into my original equation, for example, 81 is less than, let's say, negative 9 times, what's a number that's smaller than negative 9? Let's just do negative 8, okay? Negative 8. What we realize is, oh wait, no, that's not. Yeah, that's not smaller. Let's do negative 10. That's smaller. Negative 10 is smaller. Okay, so now when we check our answer, we have 81 is less than positive 90. And now that works. So if you want to write this rule down on your page or in your notes, we're going to say a rule. When multiplying, it only works when we're multiplying or dividing. When multiplying or dividing by a negative on both sides, so it only works when you're doing it on both sides of the inequality sign. So it's not on both sides of the equal sign this time because it's an inequality. The inequality, I'm going to write it in caps, flip the sign. S-I-G, not S-I-N-G. S-I-G. Flip the sign, okay? So let's take a look at this. Let's do number 3, okay? To get h by itself, I have to multiply -4 on both sides. Multiply -4 on both sides. And now when I've multiplied by negative on both sides, I'm going to flip the sign to turn the opposite direction. So this was greater than or equals to, we're going to change it to be lesser than or equals to. Now my answer is -12. H is less than -12, less than or equal to -12. So when I graph this, bubble it in because it includes -12 and it's less than, so I'm going to go to the left. Okay. Let's look at number 2. To solve this, can multiply by 3 on both sides. Now here's the thing, I'm multiplying by a positive on both sides, so I don't have to do anything. 3 times -12 is -36. I don't have to flip the sign because I'm not multiplying or dividing by a negative on both sides. Now I'm going to keep my bubble open, and it's also lesser than, so I'm going to go to the left. Okay. And we did a lot of these other ones in class together. If you have questions, just let me know, but we are going to move on and take a look at lesson 5.5. Okay, so here we go, lesson 5.5. Now we're going back to just solving regular equations without an inequality here, but this time we're solving multi-step equations. And so we actually have several steps that we have to do. And this is where showing your work is just so important, because now it's not just something you can think through in your head mentally to do, but you have to show your work. So I'm going to actually do these on the little whiteboard because I just cannot fit these on here. There's so much going on. So I'm going to write some of these problems down. We'll do 1, 2, and 3. And you can get a piece of paper out. I do not want you to fit this all in your study guide because it's just going to be so crammed if you do that. Let's get a piece of paper out and write this down and follow along as we go. So we're really just bringing in everything we've looked at in the last 2 chapters. For example, 8 times parentheses g minus 3 equals 24. Doing this, we have a parenthesis. So remember, when we simplify an expression with a parenthesis, we can distribute. Remember, we've done this before, so we can distribute this. And when I look at my terms, I'm going to look at it with the sign that comes in front of it, just so that I don't have to worry about am I adding or subtracting. That operation, the sign, the addition, the positive or negative sign becomes the operation. So 8 times g is 8g. 8 times -3 is -24. That equals 24. Now my next step, I have to combine my like terms. So right here, my like terms are -24 and 24. So to combine them across the equal sign, I have to do the opposite. I'm going to add 24 on both sides. Now I have 8g equals 48. Now I can divide by 8 on both sides, and g equals 6, and that's my answer. So if I want to check this, I can plug g back in. 6 minus 3 is 3. 3 times 8 is 24. 24 equals 24. So check, that actually works. So you can check your work to make sure it's correct. All right, let's do number 2. So number 2, we have 5 times x plus 3 equals 25. So I'm going to distribute. 5 times x is 5x plus 5 times positive 3 is 15, equals 25. Subtract 15 on both sides. 5x, this is gone, equals 10. Divide by 5 on both sides. X equals 2. So if I check my work, x equals 2. So 2 plus 3 is 5. 5 times 5 is 25. That works. Okay, let's do number 3. You can pause it and try this out on your own. 7 times 2c minus 5 equals 7. Okay, how did you guys do? So distribute. Ooh, 7 times 2c, what would that be? 14c minus 7 times, well, times negative 5, so it's negative 35 equals 7. Add 35 on both sides. This equals 42. 14c, divide by 14 on both sides. Am I doing this correct? Let's double check. Okay, yeah, I'm doing it right. C equals 3. All right, now if I double check, plug this back in, my work that I'm checking, 2 times 3 minus 5, and all that times 7. So 2 times 3 is 6. 6 minus 5 is 1. 1 times 7 is 7. So that works. All right, let's go back to our study guide for a second. Now we have parentheses on both sides of our equation for number 5. So let me do that down here. We're really not going to do anything different. When we're working out a problem or an expression that's on one side of our equal sign, you're really just simplifying it. So in this case, I'm going to make this 2s plus 22. And then in this case, I'm going to make this 5s plus 10 because I'm distributing it into my parentheses. So I'm doing the same thing on both sides where I'm distributing. Now I've got an s on both sides. So remember, this is like where we left off from the first lesson of chapter 5, but where we have an unknown on both sides of our equal sign. Well, let's combine our like terms first. So maybe I could subtract 2s on both sides. Then all I have is 22 equals 3s plus 10. Now my like terms are 22 and 10. So maybe I'll bring my 10 over, subtract 10, and I have 12 equals 3s, divide by 3, and 4 equals s. Now, if you want to check, you can plug 4 back in an s on both sides here and work them out and see if you get the same thing on both sides. Okay, let's take a look at number 6. I don't think I'm going to do all these problems with you, but let's just take a look at number 6. Okay. Distribute, let's distribute to get rid of our parentheses first. So anytime you see a parentheses, that's always the first thing you're going to do. Now you're going to multiply. 2 times y is 2y plus 6 minus 2. Now, if you see like terms on the same side of your equal sign like this, you can just work that out and simplify this. Combine this. 6 minus 2 is 4, positive 4. So now I'm going to rewrite that. Now I'm going to balance this out, okay? I'm going to bring my y's over on one side, bring my numbers all over on the other side. So I can subtract 2y. Now I have 5y minus 1 equals 4. I'm going to add 1 on both sides to keep it balanced. And now I have, I'm going to write it up here, 5y equals 5. To get y by itself, I have to divide by 5 on both sides. Y equals 1. All right, see how many steps there are? There's quite a bit going on here. So really, the goal of working this out, just do one step at a time. Don't get overwhelmed. Think through one step at a time. What can you do for this one step? Go down to the next one. What can you do in that next step? Simplify that, go down to the next one. Until you've condensed it down, 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 all the way where you figured out what y is. So one thing that I'm looking for here is that your equal signs are all matched up vertically. So if it helps you to put a line through separating out your left and right side of the equal sign, put that down, okay? So let's do number 9 together. Number 9's got a lot going on. I need to write that down here on my paper first. Okay. And I'll do this on my whiteboard here. Hopefully you're doing this on your paper. So 1 plus 2 times b plus 6 equals 5 times b minus 1. So to not get overwhelmed, the first thing we just want to focus on is what can we do to simplify this? Well, got a parentheses. So let's get rid of this parentheses by distributing. That's all we need to focus on for this step. So if it helps you to kind of draw a straight line separating out your left and right, please do that. Now I have 1 plus 2b plus 12 equals 5b minus 5. Right, I'm keeping my equal signs in the same column. Now, looking at this, on one side of my equal sign, I've got a 1 and a positive 12. Those are things that I can combine together without having to do the opposite because they're on the same side of my equal sign. If I have 1 plus 12 apples, let's imagine there's 12, on one side of my scale, isn't that the same thing as saying there's 13 apples on this side of the scale? Yes, it's the same thing, right? So I'm not having to like take anything away here. I just rewrite this to be 13. Now I have 13 plus 2b equals 5b minus 5. See, I'm just doing one thing at a time. Don't get overwhelmed and try to do a bunch of stuff all at once. That's going to confuse us. So we're just going to do one thing at a time. I can combine this, so I'm going to do that. And then rewrite everything down. Now I've got like terms of 13 and negative 5 and 2b and 5b. So maybe I'll bring this 2b over, subtract it. So I'm taking it off over here. When you take something off, that's when you have to do it on the other side as well. Okay, so now this becomes 3b minus 5 and then 13 over here. There's no like terms with 3b. I have negative 5 and 13. Those are like terms. So let me add 5 on both sides. Now I have 18 equals 3b. The last thing I'm going to do is divide by 3 on both sides, and I'm left with 6. 6 equals b. All done. Look how many steps I had. You should feel very proud of yourself for being able to do equations like this. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps here. So, well done. Okay, let's take a look at the back of this study guide. On the back, we are just looking at the same thing, but now looking at inequalities. So when we're working this out, we are really going to apply the same exact concepts as what we just did, except for instead of writing an equal sign, we're going to write it as an inequality sign. So let's look at number 1 there, and I'm going to do it on the whiteboard. So we have 5c plus 9 is less than negative 11. So subtract 9 on both sides. I have 5c is less than negative 20. Divide by 5 on both sides. Now, this is where you have to be really careful because we've got so much we've got to keep track of. Remember, we talked about if we divide or multiply a negative on both sides of our inequality, we have to flip the sign. So when you have division or multiplication that you're doing with your inequalities, you need to double check and just think through, is this a positive or is this a negative? Okay, so this is, thankfully, this is a positive 5, so I don't have to change anything. This is just because what's being divided here on both sides is positive. So my answer is C is less than negative 4. So if I were to graph that on my number line, I would put negative 4 here, circle where it is, and then C is less than. So it's going to the left, and it's pointing to the left there. And there you go. Let's take a look at one more, okay? Let's do number 2. Looking at this, I've got 8 is 8 minus 4p is greater than 20. My like terms are 8 and 20. Now I have to take off 8 over here. Then I need to do it on the other side as well. Now I'm left with negative p is greater than 12. Now to get p by itself, I have to divide by negative 4. Now, this is the tricky part because it's easy to forget and it just takes practice. So if you forget, it's okay. Just look back at it and say, okay, I forgot to flip the sign, which is a normal thing to do. It just takes practice. So because I divided by a negative, I need to flip the sign. And now when I work this out, this becomes negative 3. And my answer is P is less than negative 3. So I'm going to shade this to the left, being less than negative 3. Okay, you guys can try the next ones on your own. I'm not going to go in detail over them, but if you have questions, just send me a message and I can make another video going over it.